Let's walk through some ways to sew some half square triangles. Welcome, I do sewing and DIY related content, and today we are talking about half square triangles. So these are really building blocks for different quilting patterns that you may see, including like flying geese patterns, so many different options, and we're going to be talking about how you can make these. So let's get started. Grab some of your favorite quilting cotton, make sure it's pre-washed, and let's begin. So let's say you just wanted to create one half square triangle. I'm going to go ahead and cut out two triangles. So I'm just going to do this by 5 inches by 5 inches and cutting this on a 45-degree angle, and this will give me a triangle piece of fabric. Now, the issue with this is because we have cut this out on the bias, so on that 45-degree edge, the fabric is not actually as stable. It's almost a little stretchy, and this can distort our fabric and the overall half square triangle that we're creating, so it may not be the best option for you to use. You can go ahead and do this, as this could be a great way if you just had scraps of fabric left over to use up those scraps, and we'll walk through how to do this, but just keep that in mind that this probably isn't your best bet of making half square triangles, especially if you need to make a lot of them. So I'm just going to sew right along that edge, and I'm just taking a 1/4 inch seam allowance, sewing this all the way down, being sure to backstitch at the beginning and the end. And then when we open this up, you actually have a square, so we get a really nice half square triangle. Like I said though, that's not necessarily the best way to go about making these, so let's try to make two at a time. So I have two squares of fabric here, both are actually about 5 by 5 inches, and I am just going to lay them so with right sides together, and then I'm going to take my ruler and I am just going to draw a diagonal line on one of the edges. You can really do it on whichever diagonal you'll feel comfortable with. So I'm just going to draw a line. You could use a water safe pen, you could use a pencil, and we're going to be taking a 1/4 inch seam allowance on either side of that line, so sewing two different seams. So I'm going to take this over, and you can see that I have my presser foot with that bars lined up on that line that I created, and I'm just going to be taking a 1/4 inch seam allowance to the right side of that line and being sure that I'm backstitching at the beginning, and then when I get all the way through, when I get to the end, I will then backstitch again, and then I'm going to just take a second seam along the other side of that line. So basically doing a 1/4 inch seam allowance to the right of the line and a 1/4 inch seam allowance seam to the left of the line. Now you can see here that I have both those seams done. I'm now going to take my ruler and I'm going to match it up with that line that we drew previously, and I'm just going to cut my fabric directly on that line. And this is now going to give us two half square triangles that we're able to use that are the same size, and we didn't have to worry about cutting out anything on that bias edge, so much less stretch and everything is the same size. Now, let's say you really need to make a lot of half square triangles. Some quilt patterns do require that. So I'm going to have this larger piece of fabric. This is around 8 by 8 inches, just as an example. And I'm going to be putting them with right sides together, both these squares. And then I'm marking one diagonal and then also marking the second diagonal. So basically drawing an X on this square. So I'm going to be taking a seam on the left and right side of each of those lines. So we're taking 4 seams, and then we're going to be cutting this out, so we will get 8 half square triangles. So now I'm just going to go to my sewing machine, as you can see here, and we are going to sew all of these seams up. So I talked about this slightly earlier, but I am using this 1/4 inch seam allowance quilting foot. It makes it a lot easier, so I'm lining the bar up with that line that we drew, and then I'm just going to go through and take that seam to the left of the line, and then I will just readjust my fabric and take that another seam to the right of the line, so I get both of those seams I'm able to use. So we got the first one done, so now I'm just going to repeat this for the other side. I've just turned my fabric and then doing the exact same seam, so now we have those two lines that are a 1/4 inch away from that line I drew. And now I'm just going to repeat this for that second diagonal line that we drew, so making that X onto the fabric. Now for this, be sure again that you are backstitching at the beginning and end of each of those seams. So now I have my 4 seams done, and what I'm going to do is begin the process of cutting this so that I can get my half square triangles. So the first step is you are going to take your ruler and you're going to put it in the middle, so just cutting basically this directly in half. And this is going to give you your first step. So I'm just going to go through, slice that, and then I'm going to do this at the horizontal as well, so creating 4 squares. Once we have those 4 squares, now we are going to go very similar to how we did for the 2 that we did, and we're just going to cut it out on the diagonal. So where we drew those lines, I'm just going to be cutting right through those lines, and then this is going to give you 8 triangles that have now been sewn together. So now we have 8 half square triangles, so you have 8 pieces of fabric, and then when you open each of these up, you'll see that you have the half square triangle, which is absolutely perfect and is what we wanted to do. So this is a great way to make a lot of these, and so many quilters actually have on different blogs, there's whole tables showing you the exact measurements. So if you're trying to get a very specific size half square triangle, the math has already been done for you for what size you would need to cut out that larger square. I hope that this video was informative to you. If it was, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you're quilting, especially in this upcoming season, and if you have any other suggestions for making half square triangles. Thanks so much for watching.